film started with the limousine on Houston Street as it approached the turn onto Elm Street. At that point, William Greer, the driver of the limo, had difficulty maneuvering that 110-degree turn onto Elm Street. And it appeared that at first he wasn't targeting the car to go down Elm Street, but rather that he was targeting the service road in front of the Texas School Book Depository. And then he began to struggle as he realized that that wasn't where he was supposed to go, and he maneuvered to try and get the limousine back toward the center lane of Elm Street. And you can see that in this film. I mean, the entire turn is included in the film, whereas in the Zapruder film, even though Zapruder said once he started filming, he didn't stop until the limo had gone by, the extent Zapruder film does not show the turn on to Elm Street. So the Greer maneuvers the heavy limousine onto Elm Street, trying as he was progressing down the street to get it to the center lane. And just about the time that he got to the point where the gunshots occurred, there was a lot of activity on the right-hand side on the curb. The first thing he noticed was the guy that we call the Umbrella Man was furiously pumping the umbrella up and down. He wasn't just holding an open umbrella as we've been fed by a number of other researchers. He was pumping the umbrella up and down. There was a lot of movement. The next thing was there was an individual that for many years we called the accomplice. And in later years, we called him the Cuban because he's a dark-complected man. He was wearing a cap, and in at least one still photograph, we can see that in his jacket, he had a radio device. I believe, although I know a couple of researchers don't agree, but I believe that that gentleman was Felipe Vidal Santiago. And he was furiously trying to get the attention of Greer. In fact, as the limo approached, that guy was in the street. He was standing in Elm Street. And there are a few still photographs where you can see that, in fact, he had stepped off the curb. And he was waving his arms. He finally signaled the driver with a closed fist, and this was clearly visible on this other film. And I'm told, I was in the Air Force, not the infantry, but I've been told that the closed fist signal is the infantryman's signal to stop. And it was quite apparent that when Greer saw the guy, he did exactly that. He stopped right there. He stopped on a dime. He stopped with such suddenness that it jostled the occupants of the limo. I mean, they were all thrown forward a bit as the limo came to a complete stop. Did not just slow down, it stopped. At that moment, Greer turned around with the limo stopped, and he faced JFK. And as he did, the choreography of this is astounding. He turned around and he stared JFK in the face, and then you see JFK's head explodes from the frangible bullet. At that point, Greer turns back around and he proceeds to get out of Dealey Plaza, although I gotta say, there was no evidence in the film that he floored it. He just saw that JFK had been hit and he started the car. I don't know the specs on that car, how fast it can accelerate, but he did not, do a rabbit start out of Dealey Plaza. And he went forward, and the lead car, quite simply, was in his way, so he swerved to the left, and he passed the lead car and proceeded to get to Stemmons Freeway to get the president to Parkland Hospital. Now, the events that I just described took place almost as if they were choreographed. And since I and a half dozen other people that I know have seen that film, Len, there's no question in our mind as to whether the limo slowed or it stopped. It stopped. I don't mean that it parked. I mean it stopped for possibly 2 to 3 seconds. But during that interval, JFK was hit by 2 headshots. One where you could noticeably see his head move forward a bit. That would have been a shot to the rear of his head. I would suspect it was probably a low-velocity shot, just based on the movement of his head. And then, of course, the gory exploding shot from the right front. And then Greer got the limo out of Dealey Plaza. So it looked all very choreographed to me. But there's no question in our minds that the limo stopped. Now, there were a couple of frames in the extant Zapruder film. I don't remember which frame it was. I'm thinking it was 308, but I could be off, where Dr. Roderick Ryan, who worked for Kodak and was a consultant to the motion picture industry. In fact, when he retired, he got a Lifetime Achievement Award at the Oscars. He looked at the neighboring frames, and he was able to determine that the frames that showed the limo being blurred somewhat, the limo was in motion, and the one where the limo was in sharp focus, it was in sharp focus because the limo was standing still. I mean, we have even more evidence than just the other film that the limo had stopped. Now, I have to say that one would conclude from what you see between the limo reacting to somebody signaling it to stop and it stopping and so forth, that there was Secret Service complicity in the assassination. Of course, we know that agents were called off the limo, and they did not take their usual steps in protecting the car. But here we have both Greer and Kellerman aware somebody was approaching the car, and at that point, I think that I would have floored it at that point, not knowing who that individual was, but instead, Greer stopped the car. And President Kennedy's head was blown off.